Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the first of our four-part psychosocial webinar series. My name is Stacey Chumley, and I'm the Training and Client Success Manager for MTA. MTA is excited to be partnering with Howden, Care and Bond University to help shine a light on creating a healthy, safe and resilient workplace within the rail industry. Before we get started, we might just kick off with a few housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded so it can be shared with anyone who is unable to attend. To minimise background noise, everyone has been placed on mute. We will include a few interactive activities using Mentimeter. During the presentation, you will see QR codes on the screen where you can share your ideas on addressing common psychosocial hazards within the rail industry. However, further instructions will be provided during the session. Please feel free to add any questions into the Q&A box, and we will try and address them throughout the presentation or at the end. And a link to this presentation will be circulated after the webinar. Today, we are joined by two leading industry expert speakers in the psychosocial field. We have Shehan Peiris. Shehan is the Partner People Risk at Howden and the Chief Mental Health Officer at the National Psychosocial Safety Network. Shehan is an experienced in-house psychologist specialising in implementing large-scale enterprise risk frameworks and leading mental health initiatives across the private, community and rail sectors. He has worked on major rail projects, including the Suburban Rail Loop and the Level Crossing Removal Project. And also today with us, we have Elizabeth Muscat. Elizabeth is the associate at Howden and a clinical psychologist with extensive experience in workplace wellbeing and psychosocial risk management. Elizabeth helps leaders across multiple sectors turn insights into practical strategies, enabling teams to communicate better, build trust, and create supportive workplace cultures. And with that, I'll hand over to Shehan to kick off today's presentation.
Amazing. Thanks, Stacey, and thanks, Liz, as well. Let me begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather today and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I'd also like to acknowledge those with lived experience of mental ill health or suicide. This can bring up tough emotions for people, so it's okay to excuse yourself at any time. And thank you everyone for joining us. If people feel comfortable to do so, I'd love to see some faces on the cameras, so feel free to pop those on. The agenda for today's session is going to be fairly brisk because we've only got 45 minutes with everyone, so we really appreciate the time you put aside with us. But I want to sort of land the session with Liz and myself focusing on how Howden and MTA came about from a partnership perspective. And I'm going to hand over to Liz to talk through understanding of psychological safety, psychosocial hazards. For many of you, we're expecting that this is not a new term for you. You're well versed in this space, but also using this as a bit of a foundational understanding for some of you as you have to talk to lead, develop programs in this space as well. So we want to really share with you how MTA and Howden have worked together to build these what we call critical risk controls to manage psychosocial hazards. The programs that we're going to share and the steps that you can take next are directly aligned to best practice across Australia and New Zealand as well. So if you have footprints in these regions, I want you to know that you're also leading best practice globally in this space as well. So what's really exciting is that the partnership with Howden and MTA brings together Howden's global risk management expertise. As you can see, Howden is now in 57 countries across the world, including an increased presence in the US markets as well. What that means for MTA and our partnership is that we can bring together the expertise from all these markets in how we protect people, right? And that's a really critical part of what we do in the Australian market as well. So if we look at the Australian market, we're quite well positioned in this space. We're over 16,000 clients now in Australia. One unique difference about Howden is 30% of our business, even in Australia, is employee owned. Right. So, we're invested, we're connected, and we have now over 400 employees across Australia and New Zealand and a recent office in Fiji as well. What do we do and what's the profile of our team? So The resources that you're leaning into and the resources you're going to learn about today come from significant experience in injury management, leadership coaching, and work health and safety. That forms a critical part of our Howden Care program of service delivery. We also have a significant employee wellbeing and benefits team. We look after salary continuance, group life, private health, financial wellbeing, and a whole range of programs that focus on the individual's health and well-being within the context of work. We also have a significant support and recovery function and a workers' compensation arm of our business. We have placement, analytics, and injury management support services as well, based across Australia and New Zealand. And currently the leading provider in New Zealand of injury management and occupational rehab in that space as well. So one of the unique reasons why we sort of decided to look at a rail industry program and service delivery is from the development of our programs across Queensland Government. So we have a very strong relationship with Queensland Government, and we're an approved panel service provider for Queensland Government. We provide a range of services around physical health and wellbeing, work health and wellbeing services, psychological health and wellbeing services, and financial wellbeing services as well, which might be critical at points like this when cost of living crisis and fuel prices are driving some of those additional psychosocial strains on our people and our population as well. So we're part of the program to deliver for Queensland, and part of the program means that we have to go through a significant process of actually vetting and assessing the capabilities of, not just the content that we're delivering, but the people that we're serving and protecting, right? So what we want you to do is really look at this program of works and the works that we're talking about today as how we sort of collaborate with you to customize these for your organization as well. So the MTA Howden programs that you'll hear about have been designed for you and for the sector, but we understand that there are nuances within the context of your work that we want to learn about and help customize that for that area as well. So over to Liz to talk a little bit about our understanding of psychosocial hazards.
Thanks, Shehan. I guess I want to just start by talking about what psychosocial hazards are. And so they are essentially the intersection of social, cultural, and environmental factors within a workplace. So I guess it's important to sort of break that down. What does that mean and what does that look like? And so when we're thinking about specifically social factors, we're thinking about the way that people interact, right? So thinking about things such as a supervisor speaking down to a team member in front of others, or conflict within teams and tension that might build over time. So these social factors can cause psychosocial hazards because they can lead to people feeling quite anxious coming to work, or feeling quite stressed or unsupported in the role. Whereas when we're thinking about cultural factors, and something that is probably worth thinking about in the rail industry, is cultural factors can be led by sort of social mores and gender norms. So if we're in an industry that is quite male dominated, there might be cultural factors in the workplace, such as being quite stoic or toughing things out, or having a higher tolerance for high work demands and fatigue. And so that can create hazards within the workplace, because there might be that sense of just pushing through, and team members and people not really understanding, what their limits are, both physically and emotionally. And then we think about, the environmental factors. So that's really to do with actually how we do the work that we need to do. And so in the rail industry, that includes things like the fact that, there might be more exposure to serious incidents that could cause vicarious trauma, or there might be, I guess, the stress that comes with the fact that it's quite a fast-paced environment. And so we're thinking about all of those three things intersecting and causing psychosocial hazards within the workplace. So I guess we want to take some time to reflect on, what do psychosocial hazards actually look like in the rail industry? So I invite you to get your smartphones out and scan the QR code, just so we can have a bit of a reflection around, where at the moment do you feel your organisation and business is on their psychosocial hazard journey? So tier 1 would be, we're communicating what a psychologically safe workplace should look like. Tier 2 would be we've completed a risk assessment and we've consulted with our workplace. Or tier 3 is, we're actively engaged in developing and changing risk controls to manage hazards. And, this is all a very, I guess, new kind of, the legal landscape has changed. And so there probably is going to be a lot of variation amongst businesses around how far along the journey that we are. I mean, it's great to see that it looks like the majority are really engaged in this already. But it's not common. It's pretty common that, not every organisation has started this journey. And this is what I guess, we're interested in today, in understanding. Great. Okay, so we might just keep pressing on, but yeah, it looks like, we've got a really engaged audience in the sense of, a lot of you are sort of really starting to already implement and keep pressing on with this.
I think just a quick summary to that as well is that we've also got a lot of people that are sort of saying, we're building those risk controls and we're in that space now. I think the context before that around where you focused on consultation with the workforce, I think that should be the key driver for people to determine how they build their risk controls. And I think a lot of the work that MTA has done to build some of these programs that support the rail industry have come from consultation. And a lot of the people on the call today have actually been in those consultation groups themselves as well, where we are building through that real human-centric design where people are actually sharing with us what they're challenged by, even as a health and safety professional or a people and culture professional, and then taking that context and then testing that again within the context of the work forces to see and determine whether or not that would actually be applied and work within that context as well. So yeah, lots of great learnings, but I'll hand back to you for some of the stuff that's coming through now.
Yeah. And so, I'm inviting you all to sort of have a bit of a think of what are kind of the hazards that you're already observing in the industry. And we can already see that, there's lots of reflection around, bullying. Okay, so that's really telling us that there's that social factor around how the team are interacting with one another. And, do they know kind of conflict resolution strategies to work through that? Or how are leaders, when they're sort of faced with supporting team members to address bullying, how are they addressing that? Do they feel confident to do that? Do they feel able to have those conversations, or does that feel quite foreign and challenging for them? And so I'm just going to group some of the answers so we can get a sense of what the themes are that are coming up. So workload, long hours, these are all the parts of the environment, right? The things that are inherently in the job that we know are impacting people's stress levels and their ability to sort of continue with the work and recover and rest. Okay. So I guess I want to also talk to some examples of what psychosocial hazards could look like coming from people within the rail industry, right? And so, you know, these are sort of some common quotes or quotes that could be heard by workers that gives you that indication that there might be something going on for them and there's some hazards that they're experiencing in the workplace. So, you know, we're constantly having to work overtime because the systems we use are outdated and things take twice as long. So that's an indication of someone with high job demands. And if that prolongs, that could move into fatigue and possibly psychological injury or physical injury, right? Because their reaction time is slower, they're more tired, you know, they're feeling frustrated, maybe anxious coming to work. And so that's, yeah, a real risk there. You know, supervisors often talk down to us when things go wrong. I feel like they blame me and I'm not safe to report my problems. So this one is about poor support, but it also speaks to a safety culture within the team, right? If we've got supervisors who discourage people from talking about when things go wrong or when mistakes happen in the workplace, we're not going to have visibility within the workplace when things do go wrong or when there are problems. And if we don't have that visibility, we increase the risk of it getting worse or psychological injury occurring, right? And so that's cultural and social. And the last one, so every time I walk onto a new construction site, there is a lot of conflict and it makes me anxious. So this is an example of conflict and poor workplace interactions. Now, it sounds like this one could be just exposure to conflict and poor workplace interactions. So even if that person who is walking into the workplace isn't directly involved in the conflict, it can still have a psychological impact, which again, I think sort of reiterates that message that, you know, what happens within the environment, within the culture of the teams, within the people that we work with has an impact on everyone, regardless of whether or not they're directly involved. And so, again, this speaks to how can we sort of try and support leaders and organisations to feel able and capable to address these problems and have the confidence to mitigate and, you know, have that early intervention and prevention to stop these things from happening. And so, you know, we've spoken a bit about a few of the psychosocial hazards that can come up within the rail industry, and you know, all of you have sort of had a bit of a chance to share about what you see. Now, these are the 17 psychosocial hazards that have been defined by Comcare, and so when we're thinking about you know, how we regulate or how we're assessing, you know, psychosocial hazards, this is what regulators are going to be looking for. So this is sort of that extensive list. So now we're going to move into a bit of an activity around how do we understand, you know, how we can perhaps control or put things in place to address some common hazards that come up within the workplace, within the rail industry. So here is an example of poor organisational justice. So rail workers notice that preferred shifts or overtime opportunities are allocated based on favouritism rather than fairness. This creates resentment and low morale. So I'd just like to invite the audience to have some input around, you know, what are controls that we could put in place to mitigate or manage poor organisational justice? So we're really going to be thinking about how do we make how the decisions are made within the business more fair. Yeah, great transparency. Absolutely. So, you know, communication and, you know, having everyone in the workplace, all of the people that are, in the team is really important for, having them understand why decisions are made, and they can see a clear roadmap as to how and why decisions and processes are followed and made within the business. So yeah, ballot system, great. Communication, yeah. Scheduled rosters, yeah. Yeah, so it's all about incorporating that fairness, right? How do we help the person on the ground who doesn't see all of the things that go on in the background and isn't always going to see what's going on in the background in those management decision-making spaces? How do we help them understand that, we've thought about what's going on for you, and we've thought about, what's fair for everyone, and how are we communicating that to them? And so, yeah, consultation, communication, yeah, fairness in rosters, absolutely.
Liz, I was just going to jump in and say one of the best ways to think about how we reduce the perception or the level of bullying in the workplace, right? So that perceived level of bullying in the workplace is by teaching managers and leaders what effective justice looks like. So what individual fairness looks like, what decisional fairness looks like, what procedural fairness looks like. If leaders don't know what organizational justice means or how to create better justice through effective communication and consultation, then it's very likely that people will just say, well, it's not fair, you're targeting me, you're singling me out, and make that claim for bullying, right? So thinking about how we manage some of these other psychosocial hazards rather than just going and doing, hey, let's just do a bullying workshop across the workforce, is a really strategic and systemic way to be able to make that change.
Yeah. So now let's have a bit of a think about lack of role clarity. So this is when a worker isn't sure what they're supposed to be doing or what they should be prioritising within their work. And an example of this could be a trail operations employee is unsure whether they prioritise assisting passengers or managing platform safety because the responsibilities are unclear, and it causes anxiety and, it should say, confusion. So have a think about what controls we can put in place to support this worker to create more clarity for them in their role. How can we help them understand what they have to do and how to prioritize work? Yeah. Yeah. SOPs, great. Open communication, clear expectations, defining expectations. Yeah. Yeah, pre-work briefings, fantastic. Yeah, and so this kind of hazard is something that might be seen more in earlier months or sort of for newer employees, right? When they're sort of starting to get to know the job and the role. And so, it's really great to see that there's these, brainstorms around how we can control this hazard. And I guess, it could be other ways of, having a buddy system for people who are onboarding to help support them understand, this is how we do things around here. This is how we should prioritize work. That ongoing support can come into, causing a lack of role clarity, right? If that support isn't provided to the employee. So we'll get a bit of a summary of shared thoughts. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I'll hand over to Shehan to talk a bit about, why do we need to address psychosocial hazards? Why is it important?
And two quick slides that I'm going to share that Liz is sharing now. So the two quick slides are really about the return on investment for leadership teams, executives, ops managers through to CEOs, right? I know a lot of you are in the front line driving the change conversation, and trying to lift or elevate the organization's maturity on that safety journey, right? What we generally talk to is some of the associated costs within the workers' compensation space. So we know now from Safe Work Australia that each psychological injury claim is an average cost of $502,000 per year, right? Now, that is across Safe Work at a national level. We've got that data in every state and territory. We see the increase in costs of psychological injury claims, where in some states where they might only be 20% of the overall claims cost, they're actually over 60% in the total cost structure, right? So some significant indirect costs as well when we're thinking about why this is so impactful. Things that you may not know and things that might really land on the pages of all the leaders are the individual fines associated with not creating a psychologically safe workplace. And I think there's a big misconception out there that insurances will protect you from fines. Well, from an insurance company, let me demystify that and say, no, insurance will not cover the cost of fines and jail time, okay? None of us working insurance are going to do your jail time or fines, right? What's really important to consider is that we have a duty of care. All of you have a duty of care to actually communicate that to your leadership teams. So the program of works that Liz is about to talk about now actually helps you articulate that and communicate the costs and the implications. So if we haven't actually gone out there and shared with our leadership teams this slide, and we'll send you this slide after the session, things to note that even in states like Victoria, it can reach up to 391,000. The current rate that's just been released is roughly around, 320,000 as well. So somewhere in that sort of space. But what we're sort of seeing across Australia is fairly consistent focus on operations managers, leaders, and people that are actually tasked with creating safer systems of work and managing those systems of work, right? So really, really important to consider that in terms of their obligations as well. Back to you, Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Shehan. So why now? As everything as Shehan said, there's really big implications if this isn't put into place and if businesses fall to the wayside around implementing, creating a safe work environment. But we also know that it supports performance, it helps teams grow. It also supports, when bigger changes come down the road, with automation and things like that too. So I'll speak to that as well. And we know that, with psychological injury, there is much longer return to work and it's more costly and it's a greater loss and burden for the company. So it's really important to make work safer. And so how do we do that, right? It's about a lot of things, right? It's regular risk assessment, integrating psychosocial safety and psychological safety, creating a culture and a team where they're really on board with why this is important, right? And so instilling this, these messages into every worker that steps into the workplace. It's about challenging cultural norms or, norms that don't serve us and that make work environments more challenging, and really integrating safe and respectful team cadence in habits. And so when we're thinking about, what human behavior and what we know, helps promote change, we go through 5 different stages. And so we've got the pre-contemplation stage where we're not even sort of thinking about change at all. So this is sort of, if you can't handle it, maybe the job isn't for you. Then we move into contemplation where, I've noticed a few people are worn down lately. I just don't know what to do about it. To preparation where we're starting to get ready to make change. I wanted to help and support my team, but I don't want to make it worse. I don't know how to do it. Action, which is putting things into action. So I noticed someone wasn't there themselves that day, and so I checked in and asked how they were. And then to maintenance. So this is something that we do around here. This is the way that we operate. And I guess as a psychologist, you know, we use motivational interviewing to support people to move through these processes of change. And this is really important when we're thinking about, okay, when new things are going to be coming into the business like automation, how do we support our workers to start thinking more flexibly around moving through into from pre-contemplation, contemplation, all the way to maintenance. And so I've got a bit of an activity here around, you know, at what stage of the change cycle do we think most rail industry workers are? Are they, where do we think they are? Are they sort of not even on their radar, which would be this pre-contemplation stage? Are they thinking about change maybe? Are they preparing but they're unsure and they don't know how? Are they putting things into action, or is there maintenance happening?
It's really great, Liz, to see straight off the bat people are thinking that pre-contemplation is where most people are at.
Yeah.
I think to demystify things as well is that we want to reinforce, so that, like, especially the people on the call, we want to go out there and reinforce that all members of our team, all members of the leadership team, they've always been managing psychosocial hazards, right? Within the context of their work. You cannot live as a human being without navigating through psychosocial hazards from the point that you're born. So really thinking about what we're doing now is actually understanding the categories of those hazard areas so that we can be really precise in intervening and mitigating the risk of that. So again, if your workforce is in that pre-contemplation through to contemplation phase, the contemplation phase is where you're going to have most of the impact, because that's when they're sitting in the status quo and they're going, I actually have a stronger argument within myself not to make that change, right? So your strategic objective should be to understand, and this is where consultation comes in, understand what is the argument that's holding them in the status quo. So in order for you to move them into preparation and action, you need to understand that argument in order for you to then get them to have what we call change talk, right? So get them into the preparation means that you need to have a desire, an ability, a reason, or a need, right? So when the need becomes greater, right, then what will happen is people will jump the fence and make that change, right? If the need is not greater than the status quo, like if they're sitting in the status quo, they're not going to make that change. It's going to be another uphill battle, right? So back to you, Liz, to talk a little bit about some of the programs that actually help people move people through this contemplation to preparation phase.
Yeah, great. So, you know, MTA are going to be offering lots of supports for organisations to help manage these risks and these hazards within their workplace and control for them. So all of the supports that are on offer are available to RIW card holders and non-RIW card holders, as well as organisations who are looking for a scalable enterprise solution. So everything is customisable and it will align specifically with the organisation's context, their risks and scenarios. So you know, there's a comprehensive e-learning library. It automatically uploads into RIW cardholders' profiles for those who have the card holders. And I guess the idea is, you know, the focus is really on maximising learning and minimising, you know, operational disruption and all of that. So, you know, it's a really great sort of personalised you know, way to control and manage these risks. And as well as the psychosocial suite that, you know, Howden have collaborated with MTA on, MTA are also involving an expanded suite of online courses to cover key workplace areas. So these things include, general health, well-being and mental fitness, respectful and inclusive lawful workplaces, work health and safety compliance, risk management and assurance, cybersecurity and digital safety, and privacy, data protection and information handling. So there's lots more than just the psychosocial safety aspect. And so now let's have a bit of a talk about, okay, how is MTA transforming psychological safety? What are we putting in place? And so we've got two courses that, Howden and MTA have collaborated to put in together. This first course is specifically for leaders and has been also, developed in collaboration with Bond University. So this course has a real deeper dive into, psychosocial risk management, giving leaders the confidence and ability to have challenging conversations with their workers, learn how to change the culture of their teams and sort of promote that change. And as Shehan was saying earlier, support their workers to move from pre-contemplation or contemplation into more of the action space. So, there's 3 modules, it goes over 10 hours, and there's a formally recognised Bond University micro-credential. So you get a certificate after this to say that, I've done this assessment, or this course, in leadership in psychosocial risk management.
Just the thing to note as well is for people is that when you see 10 hours, you're probably thinking, how am I going to get leaders to sit down for 10 hours to do some training? The reason why we put it at 10 hours is because the course is aligned to Safe Work Australia, their model code of practice. It's been built in collaboration with the Queensland Mentally Healthy Workplaces Toolkit, follows the guidelines and expectations. So from a competency and a compliance perspective, what we've made sure is we've included all of those aspects across all states and territories into that program. And what you will find as you go through it and do that as well is that it's a scalable solution, right? So this is a cost-effective, scalable solution that can reach all different areas of your workforce, no matter wherever they are. And they have 12 months to complete it, right? So those 10 hours, if they can fit in 10 hours over 12 months, it's essentially a couple of days that they might put aside to do it, but it'll form part of that professional development journey. And what we've seen is hundreds of people across all different industries, including rail, already start to work on these programs over the last 2 years or so. And so it's the leading program in that space that provides access over that 12-month period and is also aligned to the standards of Bond University as well.
Yeah, thanks, Shehan. And so, and as well, it's self-paced and online. So there is that ability to come back to the content, at the flexibility of the learner. And we've got 3 modules that are involved in that. So understanding psychosocial hazards and stress, managing workplace psychosocial hazards, and a conversational wrap and FAQs. So what we know leaders will get out of this course is the ability to identify psychosocial hazards, recognizing behavior change and work-related stress, application of practical skills that will help support effective communication for themselves, but also within teams, promote psychosocial risk management, build organizational resilience, and respond more effectively. And so the second course that we've developed in collaboration with MTA is the Psychosocial Safety and Wellbeing at Work. So this is one that's specifically for all rail industry workers. This one is self-paced. Again, it's completely online. There are 5 modules of 10 minutes each. And we've included as well sort of knowledge checks and self-reflection at the end of each module to enhance learning and have workers really think about, how might they apply these skills within the work. It's also informed by work health safety obligations as well. And so the 5 modules that we cover in this course is hazards that affect my mental health and physical health and safety. So that is really about increasing the person's, I guess, emotional intelligence or ability to tune in to their mental well-being in the workplace, because we understand that in the rail industry there might not be that ability to have stopped and have the thought about, okay, how am I feeling, how am I doing in the workplace. That then gives them, that agency and ability to start thinking about, okay, how am I responsible for myself but also for the other people around me in the work. That's what module 2 is about. Module 3 covers, recognizing early warning signs. Again, this is early warning signs in ourselves, but also in others around us when perhaps there might be psychosocial hazards within the workplace, or people around them might be struggling. And so it creates that real culture of safety. Module 4 is a guide around how to step in and how to actually action, the learnings around, okay, if a worker is struggling with something, how do you have that conversation and how do you build an environment that normalizes that? And module 5 speaks to just reinforcing, all of those skills and how it is, that person's responsibility to create safety within the workplace. And so what we expect someone to gain is, understanding psychosocial hazards, how they affect safety and well-being, recognizing early warning signs and behavior change, building confidence to check in and speak up, practical strategies to reduce risk and prevent harm, and understanding their role in creating psychologically safe workspaces.
And I think that's a really important last point as well, in terms of, just as we wrap that up, the role under the Work Health and Safety Act of a worker within the context of the workplace. What we aim to do is actually reinforce those obligations as well. Back to you,
Great.
Liz, and I
Thanks.
know we're sort of just right on time now, so.
Yeah, so I guess I think we had sort of 15 minutes for questions. But yeah, I guess, it's really about, building that culture of safety, from frontline workers all the way up to leaders, and increasing that confidence, right, to be able to have conversations that are addressing, the problems within the workplace.
And I think one of the main drivers for creation, and jump in here, Stacey, as well, if you need to, is when we actually conceptualize what we need to do for the rail industry sector, we understood that a lot of the workers move between the organisations and the groups across the sector. They may move even across the whole east or west coast based on where projects are and what's actually happening. So one thing that's really important is to have consistent certification across the workforce, right? And that's why MTA's made that commitment and made it easy for all of you to have consistency. So what we want to see, and what we've seen in other businesses as well, is that, if you're employing a worker and you ask them, have you done any training? Have you done the MTA leadership program, or have you done the MTA workforce program? If they haven't done those programs as well, that they haven't even started embedding some of those solutions within the context of their work. They haven't thought about it, right? But if, hopefully in a couple of months, if you start to see workers coming through your doors that have actually done this program, this training, which is really cost effective, even if they wanted to do it themselves, right? Is that you can actually see that there's a level of learning and understanding, but then they're actually coming into an environment where you can help them practice skills. So if you've got that workforce where, you're moving into control and implementation of those controls, if you don't have people coming in that have a strong focus on safety culture, understand what psychosocial hazards are, and are literally your eyes and ears out there within the context of the environments that they work, it's going to take you longer to make that shift for them, right?
Thanks. So I think that was all from us, unless there were any questions from the team. Stop sharing.
So I think pop the questions in the chat as well. I think we had a question there, Stacey, around the cost of the program. So we put that in there as well. whereas the
Yeah.
leadership programs between 330 to 350. Normally that retails out there at just around 400. So we've obviously got that package for MTA. And then obviously the worker course between $70 to $80 per person. I think that's quite an affordable program to be able to implement and then scale out, right? So those programs also come with additional support. So if you want in-house training and support, if you want consultation around psychosocial risk management, MTA now has the capability to do all that. So be able to lean into Stacey and the team to be able to ask any questions about any additional supports in psychosocial risk management that you need. That the team's backed up by Howden, and we're able to provide that support with our allied health practitioners across the workforce, right? And that's probably the key thing that differentiates these programs, is that you're going to be working with allied health team members across the network to be able to deliver those solutions within your business. I think back to you guys, Stacey.
Thank you. We do have a question in there, Shehan. So has a psychosocial risk hazard SWIMS been established yet by anyone?
I have seen some of those established. I won't name who's established them, but we've seen them established within the context of manufacturing, and reach out to us privately, and we can talk to you about some of the structure behind what that actually looks like, and it's great to start to think about that stuff within specific verticals of the context of the work roles that people do.
Thank you. We will stick around on here for a few more minutes, I think. And if anyone's got any questions, please pop them in the chat box. We're here to answer them. But thank you, Shehan and Elizabeth, for all your valuable insights. It was a really great presentation, and we'll stick around to answer any more questions that come up. Will MTA be running any kind of awareness campaign outside the education modules offered? Yes, we will be. Stay tuned. That will be coming out via our RIW newsletter. So if you're not already registered for news, I'd suggest registering. We also have a 4-part series running on psychosocial hazards. So we'll be sending out comms around our next session. I think we've got them scheduled bi-monthly at this stage. So dates will come out in the near future. The next session scheduled, we don't have a date just yet, but it will be bi-monthly. I'll leave this one for you, Shehan. With the proposed changes suggested to workers' compensation legislation, do you think this will be better or worse for psychosocial hazards?
I think it's hard for me to make that call, but I think my personal opinion is that it's definitely drawn more attention, not just the not just the workers' compensation legislation, but you see across different states and territories, we're starting to focus in on things like gender and sexual-based harassment. So if you're up in Queensland, if you've done your psychosocial risk management prevention plan, you'll need a separate sexual and gender-based harassment prevention plan. You'll see different verticals like education and tertiary education have introduced different codes of practice that fall under the umbrella as well. I think that there is significant opportunities to reinforce with the support of the legislation the expectations now that we have on business. I think the thing we have to also consider is that we can't run our workers' compensation accounts into debt, because as we continue to do that, our premiums will go up and the cost of doing business is going to go through the roof.
Great. And then I'm a senior project engineer in SRLA. Which course works best for me, leadership or workforce?
I think both courses. I think if you're a leader, you need to do the leadership and the workforce courses. I think purely because if you're trying to lead a team, not knowing the program of works that they've done is going to be a gap for you. So I think any leaders on the call, I think, do both of them. For frontline workers, we have had to simplify the context of what we're communicating, right? And we're talking about worker obligations in the micro learning. In the micro credential, what we're trying to do is provide a credential for leaders.
We will aim to have this presentation out today as well for you to share with anybody else in the organisation. And I have also popped a link in the chat box for RIW News, so you can sign up for any news or alerts.
Awesome. That's great. So Stacey, from my end, thank you so much for facilitating this and for the work that MTA has done around actually not just raising awareness in this space, but actually creating critical risk controls. And I think that's what we wanted to reinforce in today's session, that if you're in that control space and you're looking for critical controls, our work across this area for the last 12 years has really focused on leader and workforce uplift, and starting with these through scalable, cost-effective solutions might be one of the ways that you can, continue to reach that workforce.
No, thank you, and thank you for joining. Thank you, everyone. We might leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks.